What does it feel like to be buried alive? Not in dirt, not in a coffin, buried at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, 100 feet down, in a steel tomb that used to be a ship, surrounded by the bodies of your friends, listening to things eat them in the darkness. Most people will never know that kind of fear, the kind that doesn't come and go, the kind that just sits there in your chest, in your throat for 60 hours straight. 60 hours, that's 2.5 days, trapped underwater, no rescue coming, no light, no hope, just you and the cold and the creatures circling outside. This is the true story of Harrison Okene, the man who survived the impossible, the man who listened to his crewmates die, the man who refused to give up, even when every single odd was stacked against him. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you will never look at the ocean the same way again. To understand what happened to Harrison, we need to go back. Back to who he was before that day, before he became the miracle man, before his story went viral around the world. Harrison Okene was born in Nigeria, grew up in Warri, a city in the Niger Delta region. If you know anything about that area, you know the oil industry dominates everything. Ships, rigs, pipelines. The ocean isn't just water there. It's an economy, a way of life. Harrison wasn't a sailor by trade. He was a cook, a ship's cook, 29 years old, working on tugboats to support his family, to build a future with his wife. He'd been doing this job for years. Long hours, hard work, dangerous conditions, but it paid well and Harrison was good at it. The crew liked him. He kept them fed, kept morale up. It was honest work. The kind of work that doesn't make headlines until it does. The ship was called the Jaskin 4, an anchor-handling tugboat. That's a specialized vessel designed for one of the most dangerous jobs in the maritime industry. These ships help position massive oil platforms. They drag anchors that weigh tons. They work in rough conditions in remote locations far from help. The Jaskin 4 operated in the waters off Nigeria's coast, a crew of 12 men. Experienced sailors, engineers, and one cook named Harrison Okene. May 26, 2013. This date means nothing to most people, but for Harrison Okene, it's the day his life split in two. Everything before, everything after. That morning started like any other. The Jaskin 4 was connected by tow line to a larger vessel. They were repositioning for a job, routine stuff. The kind of thing they'd done hundreds of times. It was 4:30 in the morning. Most of the crew was asleep in their bunks. After a long shift, they'd earned the rest. The ship was rocking gently, nothing unusual for the open ocean. Some of these men had families waiting for them. Wives, children, plans for when they got back to shore. They had no idea they would never see land again. Harrison was awake. He couldn't sleep. Something had him restless that night, so he got up and went to the bathroom, wearing nothing but his boxer shorts. The most ordinary moment imaginable. The kind of moment you don't remember. You use the bathroom, you go back to bed, life continues. Except sometimes life doesn't continue. Sometimes life shatters. Before leaving for this trip, Harrison's wife had sent him a text message. It was a prayer, a blessing for his safety. He'd read it dozens of times. That night he was thinking about her, about the life they were building, about coming home. He didn't know that in the next 60 seconds he would begin fighting just to survive. 4:50 in the morning. The ocean decided to remind everyone who was really in charge. A rogue wave. If you don't know what that is, let me explain. Most ocean waves follow patterns. They're predictable, but rogue waves are different. They appear from nowhere. Twice, sometimes 3 times the height of surrounding waves. Scientists still don't fully understand them. They just know they are real, and they're killers. The wave hit the Jaskin 4 like a freight train, but that wasn't the worst part. The ship was being towed. When the wave struck, it didn't just push the ship, it twisted it, turned it. In the space of seconds, the Jaskin 4 capsized completely. Imagine that. One moment you're standing in a bathroom. The next moment, the ceiling is the floor. The floor is the ceiling. and water is pouring in from everywhere. Harrison was thrown across the room like a toy. He slammed into walls, furniture, everything that used to be bolted down and was now flying through the air. The lights went out instantly. Total, absolute darkness. The kind of darkness that's almost physical. You can feel it pressing against your eyes. The ship began sinking. 100 feet to the seafloor, with 12 men trapped inside. Picture this for a moment. You're in a metal box. That box is filling with water. That box is upside down. And that box is falling through black water to the bottom of the ocean. You can't see anything. You can't grab onto anything stable because nothing is stable. Up is down. Left is right. Every door you knew, every hallway you memorized, it's all wrong now. And the water keeps rising. Harrison scrambled through the corridors. His training kicked in. Muscle memory, he knew this ship. He knew these passages, but the ship he knew was right side up. This was a mirror world, a nightmare version. Water was everywhere, rushing through open doors, filling compartments, rising faster than he could move. He could hear them, his crewmates, screaming, banging on walls, calling for help. These were men he'd worked with for months, men he'd cooked breakfast for that very morning, men with faces and names and families. He heard them die. One by one the screams stopped, the banging stopped. The ship filled with water and silence. 11 men, gone just like that. Harrison kept moving. He wasn't thinking about the others, couldn't think about them. Survival instinct had taken over, that ancient part of your brain that doesn't care about anything except the next breath. The water was at his neck now, then at his chin. He was running out of ship, and then he found it, a pocket of air, maybe 4 feet of breathing space, where the water hadn't reached yet, a tiny bubble of life in a tomb of death. Harrison climbed up onto something, a piece of furniture, a shelf, something, anything to keep his head above water. He made it. He was alive, but he was also 100 feet underwater in a sunken ship, with no way out. Let me describe what Harrison's world looked like now. Darkness, complete darkness. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off, not the darkness of a cave. This was the darkness of the deep ocean, the kind of darkness that has weight. He couldn't see his own hands, couldn't see the water inches from his face, couldn't see anything at all. And the cold. The water was cold, not freezing, but cold enough to kill you over time, cold enough to make your muscles cramp, to make your body start shutting down. Harrison was in his underwear, nothing else. No wetsuit, no thermal protection, just skin against cold, salt water. His body started shivering. It wouldn't stop for 60 hours. Here's something most people don't think about. Air pockets don't last forever. Every breath Harrison took converted oxygen into carbon dioxide. The pocket was keeping him alive, but it was also slowly poisoning him. As the oxygen depleted, the carbon dioxide built up. Harrison started getting headaches, started feeling dizzy. His body was telling him something was very wrong, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't manufacture oxygen. He couldn't escape to the surface. All he could do was breathe slowly, conserve what he had, and hope. Outside the ship, life continued. The ocean doesn't care about human tragedy. It just keeps moving, keeps living. Fish investigated the new object on the seafloor, small ones at first, curious, testing. And then the bigger ones came. Sharks, barracudas, the predators of the deep. They can smell blood in the water from miles away. There was a lot of blood in the water now. Harrison couldn't see them, but he could hear them, bumping against the hull, tearing at things he didn't want to imagine. He knew what they were eating. He knew who they were eating. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the sounds Harrison heard in that darkness. The ship groaning, metal under pressure, bending, creaking. Every sound makes you wonder if the hull is about to collapse, if the water is about to rush in and finish what it started. And between those groans, other sounds, scraping, tearing, things moving in the water outside, things that are hungry. Now imagine hearing that for 60 hours straight, with no break, no relief. no way to make it stop. Harrison prayed. He wasn't a particularly religious man before that day, but in that darkness, prayer was all he had. It was the only thing he could do that felt like action. He recited the prayer his wife had texted him, over and over, like a meditation, like a lifeline to the world above, her words, her love, the only warmth in that freezing tomb. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness as much as they could adjust to absolute black, Harrison found something. A bottle of Coca-Cola floating in the water, sealed. That one bottle would be his only sustenance for 60 hours. He rationed it carefully, tiny sips, making it last. Warm Coke in the darkness. It sounds almost funny, but it might have saved his life. Harrison didn't just sit there waiting to die. In the darkness, he explored his prison. He felt along the walls, the ceiling that was now the floor that was now the ceiling. He was trying to understand where he was, trying to find a way out. There was no way out. Every passage led to flooded compartments. Every door opened to death. But he kept searching anyway, because doing something was better than doing nothing. How do you track time in absolute darkness? You can't. Day and night don't exist. Hours blur into each other. Your mind starts playing tricks. Harrison had no watch, no phone, no way to know if he'd been down there for 1 hour or 20. The only clock was his body, hunger, thirst, exhaustion. He later learned he was down there for 60 hours, but in the moment it felt like forever. Time had stopped. Above the water, people were looking for the Jaskin 4. When the ship missed its check-in, alarms were raised. A rescue operation was launched. Ships and helicopters searched the area. They found debris floating on the surface. They found the location of the wreck, but they weren't looking for survivors. 100 feet underwater in a capsized ship, no one survives that. They were looking for bodies. 24 hours after the Jaskin 4 sank, a rescue vessel arrived directly above Harrison's position. He could hear the engine. Through the water, through the metal hull, he could hear them. They were right there. Help was right there. Harrison went crazy. He banged on the walls. He screamed until his throat bled. He did everything possible to make noise. They didn't hear him. Think about that. Help was right above him, close enough to hear their engine, and they couldn't hear him screaming. The rescue team sent divers down, but the divers were looking for bodies on the exterior of the wreck. They weren't exploring the interior. Why would they? No one could be alive in there. Harrison heard the divers. He heard them moving around outside. He banged. He screamed. He prayed they would find him. They didn't. After a few hours, the boat left. The divers surfaced. The rescue operation moved on. Harrison was alone again. That moment right there, that's when most people would give up. You've survived the initial disaster. You've found a way to stay alive. You've held on for 24 hours in impossible conditions, and then rescue comes. Rescue is right there, and it leaves without you. How do you keep going after that? Harrison Okene kept going. He didn't know how, he didn't know why, but something inside him refused to die. Some stubborn primal part of his soul that said no. Not today, not like this. He kept breathing, kept praying, kept rationing that bottle of Coke, kept living. The second day was worse than the first. Harrison's body was failing. The cold had sapped his strength. The bad air made his head pound. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he started slipping into the water. Sleep meant death, so he stayed awake. He pinched himself, slapped himself, did anything to stay alert. His body wanted to shut down. His mind wanted to drift away. He didn't let it. 40 hours, 50 hours. Time lost all meaning. Harrison existed in a state between life and death. Too stubborn to cross over, too weak to do anything but endure. The ship was still settling. The ocean was still working on it, pulling it deeper into the seafloor, crushing it slowly under the pressure. Harrison could hear new sounds now, louder creaks, sharper groans. He didn't know if the ship would hold, if his tiny air pocket would survive, Every sound could be the last sound. Above the water, the sun rose on the third day. The families had been notified. 12 men missing, presumed dead. The shipping company was handling logistics. The news had moved on to other stories. Harrison Okene was already being mourned. His wife was already grieving. The world had already accepted that he was gone. The world was wrong. 60 hours after the Jaskin 4 sank, a dive team returned to the wreck. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was body recovery. They were there to retrieve the dead, give families closure, complete the grim paperwork of maritime disaster. The dive team was led by professionals from DCN Diving, experienced men who had done this many times before. They knew what to expect. They knew what they would find. They were wrong too. Nico van Heerden was one of the divers, South African, veteran of dozens of recovery operations. He'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. He descended into the murky water, 100 feet down, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The capsized bulk of the Jaskin 4 looming below. Just another job, just another wreck. Nico entered the ship through an open hatch. The interior was a maze of flooded corridors. Debris floated everywhere. Personal belongings of dead men drifting in the current. He moved slowly, methodically, documenting everything, looking for bodies. He found several, in various states. The ocean had been working on them for 3 days, and then his flashlight caught something. A hand, floating in the water, pale against the darkness. Nico reached out. Standard procedure. He would tag the body, note the location, continue the search. He grabbed the hand. The hand grabbed him back. Nico screamed. You can hear it in the footage. A sound of pure shock, pure disbelief. The dead man was alive. Harrison Okene, after 60 hours at the bottom of the ocean, was still breathing. Imagine Harrison's experience in that moment. 60 hours of darkness. 60 hours of silence, 60 hours of cold and fear and hopelessness. And then, suddenly, light. A flashlight beam in the water, a human face, a voice. Someone had come. Someone had found him. He wasn't going to die down there. Nico radioed to the surface, his voice cracking with emotion. He's alive. There's a survivor. He's alive. The surface team couldn't believe it. They asked him to confirm, to check again. It wasn't possible. No one survives 60 hours in a sunken ship. Nico confirmed. The dead man was breathing, was moving, was reaching out for help. Everything changed in an instant. This wasn't a body recovery anymore. This was a rescue operation, but rescuing Harrison wasn't simple. They couldn't just pull him to the surface. At 100 feet, his blood had absorbed massive amounts of nitrogen. If he ascended too fast, that nitrogen would form bubbles in his bloodstream. It's called decompression sickness. The bends. It kills people. It kills people quickly. Think about a bottle of soda. When it's sealed, the gas stays dissolved in the liquid. Open it too fast and it explodes with foam. That's what happens to a human body if you ascend too quickly from depth. The nitrogen in your blood fizzes like soda. It blocks blood vessels, destroys tissue, causes strokes, heart attacks, death. Harrison had been at 100 feet for 60 hours. He was essentially saturated with nitrogen. A rapid ascent would kill him instantly. The rescue team had to work fast but carefully. They brought Harrison a diving helmet, fed him hot water through the suit to fight the hypothermia, got him breathing proper air instead of the toxic mix he'd been surviving on. For the first time in 60 hours, Harrison took a breath that didn't hurt. Then began the slow journey out. Through the same flooded corridors Harrison had crawled through in the darkness, past the compartments where his crewmates had died. He saw things on that journey, things he won't talk about in detail, bodies, parts of bodies. What the ocean had done to men he'd known. He kept moving, had to keep moving. They brought down a diving bell, a pressurized chamber that would carry Harrison to the surface slowly, letting his body decompress naturally, letting the nitrogen escape gradually instead of all at once. Harrison was loaded into the Bell. After 60 hours in darkness, he was finally leaving the bottom of the ocean. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. The ascent took hours. You can't rush decompression. The Bell rose slowly, pausing at different depths to let Harrison's body adjust. He was warm now. He was breathing clean air. He could see light filtering down from above. But he wasn't safe. Not yet. The diving bell broke the surface. Harrison Okene emerged into sunlight for the first time in 60 hours. Squinting against brightness his eyes had forgotten, breathing air that didn't taste like death. The crew stared at him, at this man who shouldn't be alive, this man who had survived the unsurvivable. But Harrison couldn't just walk onto the deck and celebrate. His body was still full of nitrogen. He needed more decompression time. They moved him directly from the diving bell into a decompression chamber on the ship, a metal tube where the pressure could be controlled, where his body could slowly, safely return to normal. He would spend another 60 hours in that chamber. 3 more days, 60 hours underwater, 60 hours in a pressure chamber. Harrison went from one metal prison to another, but this one had light. This one had people checking on him. This one was bringing him back to life instead of trying to kill him. He could finally sleep, finally rest, finally start processing what had happened. He talked to the medical staff through the chamber's viewing port, told them what he'd experienced. The capsizing, the flooding, the screams of his crewmates, the darkness. The doctors listened in amazement. What Harrison had survived was virtually unprecedented. The human body isn't supposed to be able to do what his body had done. But Harrison Okene had done it anyway. After 60 more hours, the chamber opened. Harrison Okene stepped out on his own 2 feet, 3 days after he should have died. 6 days after the Jaskin 4 went down. He was weak. He was traumatized, but he was alive. He called his wife, the woman whose prayer he had recited in the darkness, the woman who had been told she was a widow. She heard his voice, alive, on the other end of the line. Some conversations are too private to share. Some moments are too sacred for description. But you can imagine the tears. You can imagine the relief. The story went viral. How could it not? The actual footage of the rescue was released. You can watch it online. The moment the diver finds Harrison, the hand grabbing back, the voice confirming survival, millions of people watched. Media from around the world covered the story. Harrison Okene became famous. The miracle man, the survivor. But while the world celebrated Harrison's survival, 11 families mourned. 11 men didn't come home from the Jaskin 4. 11 men who worked alongside Harrison. 11 men whose screams he heard in the darkness. Harrison survived. He never forgot that he was the only one. He met with some of the families, tried to tell them what happened, tried to provide whatever closure he could. It's called survivor's guilt, the burden of being the one who made it, the question that never really goes away. Why me? Why did I live when they didn't? Harrison carries that weight. He'll carry it forever. The physical wounds healed. The psychological ones didn't. Not completely. Harrison suffered from severe PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks. The sound of water could trigger panic attacks. The darkness reminded him of the tomb. He was alive. But in some ways, part of him was still trapped at the bottom of the ocean. He got help, therapy, treatment, support from his family and community. Slowly, painfully, he started to heal. The human mind is resilient, not perfectly resilient, not easily resilient, but given time, given help, it can recover from almost anything. Harrison recovered, not to who he was before, you can't go back, but to who he would become after. And then Harrison Okene did something that shocked everyone. He went back to the water, not as a cook on a ship, not as a passenger. He enrolled in commercial diving school. He decided to become a professional diver. The same deep water that nearly killed him. He chose to make it his life. People couldn't understand. Why would you do that? Why would you ever go back to the thing that almost destroyed you? Harrison had his answer. He wasn't going to let the ocean win. Wasn't going to spend the rest of his life afraid. If he ran from the water would own him forever. Instead, he chose to conquer it. He got certified, a professional commercial diver, licensed to work in the same deep water that had been his prison. The man who was trapped at the bottom of the ocean now makes his living there, not running from his fear, working with it, through it. That's not just survival, that's victory. Today, Harrison Okene dives. He does the job that his rescuers did. He goes into the deep, dark places. He's comfortable there now, not because he forgot what happened, but because he chose not to let it define him. Every time he descends into the water, he's proving something. To himself, to the ocean, to whatever force decides who lives and who dies. He's proving that he's not afraid anymore. He's still married, still building that life he dreamed about in the darkness, still holding onto the love that kept him alive when nothing else could. His wife's prayer saved him. He believes that. The words she texted him, the faith they shared. It was the lifeline he needed when there was no other line to grab. Harrison tells his story now. To groups, to media, to anyone who wants to hear it. Not for fame, not for money, because his story means something. It proves something about what humans can endure, what we can survive, what we're capable of when we refuse to give up. 60 hours, 100 feet down, no hope, no help, and he lived. If Harrison Okene can survive that, what can you survive? The ocean is still there. It will always be there. Beautiful and terrifying, full of life and full of death. It doesn't care about us, doesn't hate us, doesn't love us. It just is. But we can choose how we face it. We can choose to fear it or respect it, to run from it or dive into it. Harrison Okene made his choice. He chose to live. Then he chose to go back. Then he chose to help others the way he was helped. That footage, the hand reaching out, the hand grabbing back, it's more than a viral video, it's a symbol, a reminder that survival is possible, that hope is worth holding on to, that the story isn't over until it's over. Harrison Okene's hand grabbing that diver's hand, that's the moment death lost. That's the moment life won. Somewhere out there right now, Harrison Okene might be diving, descending into the deep, into the darkness that once held him prisoner, not afraid, not running, working, living, proving. The man who survived 60 hours at the bottom of the ocean, the man who faced death and didn't blink, the man who took his worst nightmare and turned it into his career. So here's my question for you. What are you surviving right now? What's your ocean? What's the thing that feels impossible, that feels like it's pressing in from all sides, that feels like it might crush you? Whatever it is, remember Harrison Okene. Remember that 60 hours in a freezing tomb weren't enough to kill him. Remember that he made it out. Remember that he went back. If he can survive that, you can survive this. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about what you do after. It's about choosing to keep going, to keep fighting. To refuse to let the worst moment of your life be the end of your story. Harrison Okene survived. Then he lived. That's the difference. That's what matters. The ocean will keep taking. That's what it does. Ships will sink. People will die. The deep will claim more victims. But sometimes, against all odds, someone makes it back. Someone beats the mathematics of survival. Someone grabs onto the hand that reaches into the darkness. And when that happens, it reminds us all that impossible doesn't mean what we think it means. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own life and your own struggles, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. I've got more stories like this. More true accounts of human beings facing impossible odds and coming out the other side. Stories that will make you feel something. That will remind you what we're capable of. Until next time, remember Harrison Okene. Remember that the story isn't over until you decide it's over. Stay strong, stay stubborn, and I'll see you in the next one.